Hi, my name is Megan Sheehy, and this is my morphology individual presentation for 617 adolescent literacy. We're going to go through our objectives. Our objectives are morphemes. What are they? We're going to develop a foundational knowledge of what they are and how they're categorized. We're going to talk about morphology and morphological awareness. We're going to determine what it is, why it's important, and how it applies to adolescent literacy development. We're going to talk about why morphology and morphological awareness is necessary inside of adolescent classrooms. We're going to discuss activities you can use to further develop morphological abilities, and then we are going to discuss 4 research-based strategies used in the classroom to further morphological development. So, what are morphemes? I know we've all taken classes on these, but I thought a refresher would be nice. Morphemes are defined as meaningful morphological units that cannot be divided further. Unlike phonemes, they do not represent units of sound, they represent units of meaning. There are 3 types. There are root words that can stand alone as a word. My example is reach. There are prefixes that are placed before the root word. An example is un. And a suffix that is placed after the word. My example is able. There are bound versus unbound morphemes. So bound morphemes can stand alone as they cannot stand alone as a word, Bound morphemes cannot stand alone as a word. They must be paired with another morpheme. An example is un, meaning not. Un is not a word on its own. It must be paired with another morpheme, like unreachable, in order to make sense. Unbound morphemes can stand alone as a word, and they do not need to be paired with another morpheme. An example would be reach, or an example would be able. You are able to do something. You can reach for something. Those are both words that make sense in the context of the English language as independent words. So, morphology and morphological awareness. Are they the same thing? No. Morphology is the study of how parts of words, morphemes, come together to create different words with different meanings. So it's the study of this process. Morphological awareness is the ability to manipulate morphemes to create new words or develop an understanding of a word that you may not already know. So morphology is the study of how these parts come together, and morphological awareness is the ability to manipulate these parts. They are 2 different things. This is important because it is impossible to teach the meaning and definitions of every single word in the English language, especially as we are moving into middle school, where the texts are more morphologically complex. There are longer words, there are more rigorous words, and students need to have the tools and ability to define these words independently without having a teacher or an aide or a friend help them in this regard. It is critical for developing reading comprehension in adolescent students. So why is it necessary? We kind of touched on this, but what we're going to really talk about is the fact that it is a tool to decode. So as students move through school and as they get through middle school, there's a shift from learning to read to reading to learn. And it comes with new and complex vocabulary that they may not have been exposed to before. Teachers can give students tools to be able to read and decode these words, not by their units of sound, but by their units of meaning. And this is due to the increase in rigor. And this means that it's not only an appropriate place for morphology to occur, adolescent classrooms, but it's also necessary for them to be able to be successful in comprehending these more complex texts. I have a quote here that says 60 to 80% of words within middle school texts are morphologically complex. So that means it is very necessary for morphological awareness to be explicit in the classroom. I have an example here of geology. If you present this word to a middle school student, they're going to look at this word and there's a chance that they may have never seen it before. But if you break it down into smaller parts and teach them the meaning of each of those parts, they will not only be able to define this word, but other words that share these same morphemes. So geo means earth, and ology means the study of. So now you can tell your student anytime you see the word ology, you know that they're talking about studying something. This is just one of the tools that you can use in order to help further morphologically develop your students. And I have a chart here that further goes over that words are made of morphemes, prefix, root words, and suffixes. The full word here is distraction, dis being the prefix, meaning away. tract meaning pull or drag, and shun meaning state of. So if you individually learn each of these morphemes, you are able to use that knowledge in various words to help define something that you may not have encountered before. Morphology in the classroom. So the first step in developing morphological awareness in your students is explicit instruction. Explicit and ongoing instruction. This means that lesson plans are curated and carefully formed around morphology and developing morphological awareness. It is very appropriate in adolescent classrooms and in middle school classrooms, even high school classrooms, to have a day where you discuss morphology and talk about some of these root words and prefixes and suffixes. The 4 morphological approaches are part to whole, parts to whole, analogy, and whole to parts. We are going to discuss each of those in detail on the further slides. And this is something that I use in my own classroom is color coding. So having each morphological component be a color-coded example. I have a picture right here. You can see that the root word is the same for every single word here, and that is a green triangle. And I use this in my classroom, and students will mix and match and create or deconstruct words to try to create new meaning. And I'll help them define those words as they go along. But that just creates a little bit more independence. So when they're doing it on their own, I may not have to define every single word, maybe just the ones they haven't seen examples of yet. Okay, the 4 morphological approaches. So our first morphological approach is part to whole. That means building words, basically, using different morphological components. It will show how morphological components can change the meaning of words. So an example that I have here is the addition of the suffix s. So the initial word is dog, and you can define that as one dog. Dog plus s means dogs. Dogs is equal to more than one dog. So this shows that the addition of a morpheme changes the meaning of the word. Parts to whole is very similar to part to whole, except it involves adding multiple morphological components rather than a single one. So my example word, you have the root word beat. That means to defeat. If you add un and able, you get the word unbeatable, not able to be defeated. So you're adding multiple morphological components to a single root word in order to change the meaning of that word. You can also use this as beatable. Beatable means you are able to be beat. You are able to be defeated. Un is not able to be defeated. So you can kind of look at it that way. These are the more complex of the 4 steps. Analogy is based on patterns and relationships, so explicitly teaching the meaning of prefixes and suffixes and then comparing how they change the meaning of words. So this is definitely a more rigorous aspect of morphological approach, of the morphological approaches, but you can show my examples are dissatisfied and disagree. You are teaching that prefix dis means not. You are not satisfied. You are not agreeing. So you are comparing different words and seeing how the addition or subtraction of morphological components changes those words in comparison to one another. The last and most rigorous morphological approach is obviously the most complex. It is similar to part to whole, but rather than combining morphemes to create new words, you are deconstructing words. So you are given a full word and you are asked to deconstruct that word into its individual morphological components. So the example word given is construction. You deconstruct that word into construct and shun and define each of those morphemes. This just shows a very complex and advanced level of understanding of morphological awareness. And these are all activities and strategies that you can use in your classroom to further develop your students' morphology and morphological awareness. And that is it. That is all I have for morphology. Here are my references that I used throughout this presentation, and thank you so much for your time. I hope y'all have a wonderful class and rest of your evening.